Hi everybody. Today I just pulled this engine out, engine and transmission together. This is from 2005 Nissan Murano, and basically, I'm just trying to let you all know, if it helps, that it is doable without a lift. Originally, this engine was meant to come down from the bottom and rise the car up into the air. But since I don't have any lift, I decided to pull the front end. Okay, so first step before you do anything, pull the front end. Um, the front end, it's not very difficult to pull. A little bit of labor definitely. So that's the bumper cover, and that's the entire front end or the fascia. Um, in my case, I pulled it out with the radiator fans and radiator hooked up, and the AC condenser, everything hooked up. You just disconnect AC lines, power steering hoses, obviously your radiator hoses and transmission lines. Okay, um, obviously your freon, right? Make sure you get rid of the freon in the AC system before you decide to disconnect the hoses from the condenser to remove the front end. Once you have removed the front end, quite honestly, then it's very simple, because you just stand over here and then you just start removing your intake manifold, and then over here on the top I remove the cowling for the transmission wiper assembly, or the wiper blades. Okay, so that part sits right over here on top. You can remove it. It enables you to gain way more access to the back of the motor. Okay, once you do that and you have everything disconnected, obviously you have to remove the axles and all the normal stuff that you would typically remove. And then here, what I did is I unbolted the transfer case um, from the line, from the drive line, and this motor mount, actually it stays there. I disconnected it, I removed the two bolts, but quite honestly I don't think you have to. But if you do remove the bolts, when you remove the engine, it enables you to gain a little more space or wiggle room, to get the engine out. So um, the subframe, I did bring the subframe down, and I did disconnect the steering shaft. Obviously you have to mark it there, and mark it on the other side of the firewall under the dashboard. Make sure you make your marks, and the steering wheel is locked. You can lock the steering wheel by removing the key, turning the steering wheel, and then it locks itself. Then you can remove the shaft, mark it, and then you should be okay for when you go back and install it. If you don't put it back the way it was, you're going to damage the clock spring. You don't want to do that. So anyway, on the back, that's one of the bushings for the subframe. It's got a nut underneath on the bottom, so I just loosen them enough so that subframe on the rear will drop just a little bit, couple of inches. Okay, once you are ready with everything disconnected, then you go here, you come over here, sorry, you come here, and then you remove the nuts under the front side of the subframe. Okay, and then you will just let the subframe hang. One thing that I put back, it's the ball joint. Okay, just temporarily. You have to remove that ball joint when you remove the axle, or some people remove the strut. I always remove the ball joint to remove the axle. So I put it back in there, because the ball joint and the control arm, it's helping support the weight of the subframe. The subframe is not connected on the front, as you can see. Why did I do this like this? Because this transmission actually sits all the way down here. Okay, so if you leave it hanging like I did, then you gain more room to get the engine and transmission out. Anyway, this is the way I did it. It looks very dramatic. It looks like a lot of work. Yes, it is a lot of work, but if you don't have a lift, you can definitely pull this engine and transmission without a lift. Remove the front end, lift the subframe hanging, remove the steering shaft, remove and loosen up the motor mount. Okay, remove the bolt, loosen up the motor mount, disconnect the transfer case, and just leave this thing hanging. Next thing you know, she's coming out. This is the backside, or this is the area that faces the firewall. Okay, this is the transfer case. This is where I disconnected the transfer case. I didn't have to mess with the exhaust manifold in the back. I just disconnected the exhaust. On this side, this will be facing the front side of the engine. I did remove, once I got the front end removed, I did remove the exhaust manifold, okay? And then I also removed the alternator and the AC compressor. The AC compressor bolts right in there. The reason I removed the alternator and the AC compressor is because if you want to get this engine out, you kind of have to bring it out sideways. And so it gave me more room on this corner to be able to get the engine out. Okay? I'm not sure if you have to do it, but I did it. And it did help me a lot because I didn't have to worry about the AC compressor or the alternator hitting the frame. So it actually came out very well, very smooth. So